The Hinterkaifeck murders. An entire family slaughtered on their farm. Killer never found. March 31st, 1922. 6 people are brutally murdered on a remote farm in Bavaria, Germany. The killer used a pickaxe. But here's what makes this case absolutely chilling. Days before the murders, the family heard footsteps in the attic, found mysterious tracks in the snow leading to the farm, but not away, and their maid had quit, claiming the house was haunted. Someone was living on that farm, watching them. And 102 years later, we still don't know who. Hinterkaifeck, a small, isolated farmstead about 70 kilometers north of Munich, Germany. In 1922, it was home to the Gruber family. Andreas Gruber, 63, his wife, Cecilia, 72, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, and Victoria's 2 children, Cecilia, 7, and Joseph, 2. They lived a quiet, rural life. But in the days before their deaths, something was very wrong. 6 months earlier, their maid had quit suddenly. She claimed the farmhouse was haunted. She heard strange noises, footsteps where no one should be, unexplained sounds in the night. The family dismissed it. They hired a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who was scheduled to arrive on March 31st. But in the days leading up to her arrival, Andreas Gruber noticed disturbing things. He found footprints in the snow. They led from the forest to the farm, but there were no tracks leading back out. Someone had come to the property and never left. He heard footsteps in the attic, heavy footsteps. When he went to investigate, he found nothing, but the sounds continued night after night. He found a newspaper on the property that no one in the family had bought. Someone else was there, reading, watching. Andreas told neighbors about these strange occurrences. They told him to report it to police. He refused. Some say he was a stubborn man who didn't trust authorities. Others believe he knew exactly who was hiding on his property and why. On March 31st, 1922, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived at the farm in the afternoon. By that evening, all 6 people were dead. For 4 days, no one saw or heard from the Gruber family. This wasn't unusual. Hinterkaifeck was remote, and the family kept to themselves. But when neighbors noticed that young Cecilia hadn't been at school for several days, they grew concerned. On April 4th, 4 days after the murders, neighbors went to check on the family. What they found was a scene of unimaginable brutality. In the barn, they discovered 4 bodies: Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria Gabriel, and young Cecilia, age 7. All had been killed with a mattock, a farming tool similar to a pickaxe. Their skulls were crushed. The attack had been savage, frenzied. But it got worse. Inside the house, in the maid's quarters, they found Maria Baumgartner, the maid who had only arrived that afternoon, hours before her death. She'd been killed in her bed, her skull also shattered by the mattock. And in another room, they found 2-year-old Yusuf, Victoria's youngest child, also killed the same way. A toddler, murdered in his bed. But here's what made investigators' blood run cold. Someone had been living on the farm for days after the murders. The animals had been fed. The cows had been milked. Neighbors had seen smoke rising from the chimney. Someone had been keeping the house warm. There was evidence that someone had eaten meals in the kitchen, slept in the beds. The killer had stayed, for days, living in the house with 6 corpses. Police launched a massive investigation. They interviewed over 100 suspects. The entire region was in panic. Who could commit such an atrocity, and why? The bodies were sent for autopsy. But here's where the case takes an even stranger turn. In the 1920s, a new forensic technique called skull reading was being developed. Investigators believed they could identify criminals by studying skull structure. So, they decapitated the corpses and sent the skulls to Munich for analysis. The skulls were never returned. They disappeared, lost somewhere in the chaos of post-war Germany. To this day, no one knows where they are. The Gruber family was buried without their heads. For over a century, investigators and historians have tried to answer one question: who killed the Hinterkaifeck family? Theory 1, a drifter or robber. The most obvious explanation: a vagrant or thief had been hiding in the barn or attic, waiting for an opportunity to rob the family. When discovered, he killed them all to eliminate witnesses. This explains the footprints, the attic sounds, and the stranger living on the property. But it doesn't explain why he stayed for days after the murders. And robbery doesn't fit. Nothing valuable was taken. Money was found in the house, untouched. Theory 2, Victoria's dead husband. Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, had died in World War I, or so everyone believed. But his body was never positively identified. Some speculated that Carl had actually deserted, lived in hiding, and returned to the farm, possibly driven mad by the war. The family may have been hiding him, which explains why Andreas didn't report the strange occurrences to police. Perhaps Carl suffered a psychotic break and killed his own family. But this theory lacks evidence. And if it was Carl, where did he go? He was never seen again. Theory 3, Victoria's secret lover. Victoria had been having an affair with a neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Some believe he may have been the father of young Josef, not Victoria's dead husband. Rumors swirled that Andreas disapproved of the relationship and threatened to expose it. Lorenz was one of the first to discover the bodies. Suspicious timing. He also allegedly touched and moved things at the crime scene before police arrived, possibly destroying evidence. But he was thoroughly investigated and had an alibi that, while not perfect, couldn't be definitively broken. He was never charged. Theory 4, Andreas's dark secret. This is the most disturbing theory. There were rumors, never proven, that Andreas had been committing incest with his daughter Victoria. Some whispered that young Josef wasn't her late husband's child, but Andreas's own son. If true, perhaps someone, a family member, a secret witness, or even Victoria herself in a moment of desperation, finally snapped and took revenge on the entire family. This would explain the brutality, the personal nature of the attack, and why someone with intimate knowledge of the farm could hide there undetected. But this theory is built largely on gossip and speculation. No concrete evidence supports it. The truth is, every theory has holes, and the evidence that could have solved this case, the skulls, the crime scene photos, key witness statements, has been lost to time. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain Germany's most infamous unsolved case. Over 100 people were questioned. Dozens were considered suspects, but not a single arrest was ever made. In 1923, 1 year after the murders, the farmhouse was demolished. No one wanted to live there. No one wanted to buy the cursed property. The land was abandoned, and eventually the forest reclaimed it. Today, nothing remains of Hinterkaifeck, except photographs and police records. And those missing skulls, somewhere in Germany, possibly in a university archive, possibly lost forever, are the decapitated heads of 6 murder victims. What haunts me most about this case isn't just the brutality, it's the waiting. Someone hid in that attic for days, maybe weeks, watching the family, listening to them sleep, planning. And after the murders, he stayed, fed the animals, made meals, slept in their beds, as if the farm was now his. Was it a stranger? A family member? A man driven mad by war? Or something darker? A secret so terrible it led to 6 murders. The Hinterkaifeck farmstead is gone. The family is buried, beheaded in separate graves. And whoever wielded that mattock on March 31st, 1922, took their secret to the grave. 102 years later, the case remains open, unsolved, and deeply, deeply disturbing. If this case disturbed you like it did me, subscribe to Unsolved Vault. We're digging into the darkest mysteries history tried to bury. Comment below, who do you think killed the Hinterkaifeck family? Stay curious, and maybe check your attic tonight. Thanks for watching.